There are just 3 days to go till Britain hits the polls. After a painful and dispiriting performance over 90 minutes, can bicycle-kicking Rishi Sunak pull one back at the last moment? There's no extra time here, but we'll be with you all the way to polling day, and as the results start to drop, the Reform crowd are on the pitch. Labour think it's all over. It nearly is. This is Never Mind the Ballots, Election Countdown. Don't forget, subscribe, youtube.com/Sun Election. Joining me in the studio this morning, former Minister for London, top Tory Paul Scully, and the Sun's very own Martina Bett and Jack Elson. Morning, gang.
Morning.
All had lots of sleep. Watch the football?
I did indeed, yeah. It just felt a little bit of a parallel, you know, some dodgy tactics to begin with and a whiff of a betting scandal towards the end, but he pulled it off right in the last minute.
Wow, OK, you're not holding back, Paul Scully. You are no longer standing, am I correct?
I'm no longer standing.
9 years as an
I don't
MP?
think I would open with that line if I was standing, but
Well,
I'm 9 years.
So you're free and liberated to discuss at length how brilliant the Tory campaign has been.
Well, look, I mean, you know, we've got to, I think Grant Shapps coined the supermajority thing for this, because I've said for a little while now that Labour Party are clearly going to win the election, but we've got to make sure that we have lots of local champions, that we've got to have that strong opposition voice. Otherwise, opposition comes from somewhere, and we've got to be the people that do that. You always fill the vacuum.
How big a factor is the sort of lack of incumbency factor in a lot of seats, though, for the Tories? Because I think it's, 54, 60 Tory MPs stood down?
Yeah,
so, you know, that's a big advantage you have in those seats, built up over sort of a number of years, that's now gone, really.
Well, I think that's also the fact that we had the early elections, so that meant that within sort of 6 weeks for some of these seats to actually get those people with their feet under the table isn't really long enough. But nonetheless, they've been able to make the case, and I think people have pivoted towards making sure they do that strong local voice approach to the campaign.
Predictions for the result?
I don't think it's going to be as bad as some of the worst polls. I
mean, what a case of optimism.
I mean, you know, I have been slightly pessimistic about the national picture. I started off the process thinking about 140 seats for the Conservatives.
That's way down on 97.
Absolutely. I know it is. It was a feeling. That wasn't a scientific approach. But that's gone down to about 60 in some of the predictions. But part of the problem with the polls is there's so many of them. And it's widely different. It feels to me that they're actually leading opinion rather than reporting on it, which I'm slightly uncomfortable
I think
about.
I'm correct in saying, and we can edit it out if it's not, but is it in France that they ban opinion polling, Martina, in the last 2 weeks of the campaign? I was just throwing that question at you completely randomly.
I think so. I think that's right.
Do you think there's a case of that? Is it, you know, half the pollsters are going to end up looking like, well, not idiots as such, because it's a hard science, but half of them are going to be wrong, right?
Yeah, of course. And we've seen polls being incredibly wrong before, particularly in 2015, for example. But I think, you know, opinion polling is useful. If the Tories do quite well, yeah, they would be incredibly mistaken.
Jack, Rishi Sunak last night, cringe little tweet. It's not over till it's over. It's over, right?
I think so. I think the writing's on the walls for the Conservative Party. It's interesting. Rishi Sunak put out that tweet saying it's not over till it's over, thinking that he might be able to score a Jude Bellingham-style last-gasp winner. Keir Starmer put out a tweet saying it was never in doubt to begin with. So clearly, you know, both sides trying to jockey using the football analogies, both quite cringe. You're right. I mean, I think that unless all polling organisations are in some massive conspiracy to try and, you know, over-egg the current Labour majority, which they're on course for, Keir Starmer's going to walk into number 10 on Friday.
I think the point someone made was, you know, yes, some of the polls are going to be slightly out, but it's just a matter of how out they are rather than the result being up. What I want to talk about this morning is NIGEL Farage, obviously Reform late entrance. I went to his rally yesterday. It was, well, let's have a look at it. It was pretty crazy. I'm not gonna lie. It was like nothing I've ever been to in this country. There he is, coming on stage with pyrotechnics. There were 5,000 people in there. It was pretty Trumpy, to be honest. They had a bus parked up inside the stadium. Well, sort of NEC, the big hall one of the NEC. Big old room, giant Union Jack flags hanging down there. Obviously, we saw Paul Scully in 2017. Jeremy Corbyn pull stuff like this. Not quite on that scale, I'd say, but a sort of big outpouring of, you know, sort of public support that basically gave him a bit of momentum. Do you think there's momentum of reform?
Well, there's momentum around NIGEL Farage. I think this isn't about reform. This is all about NIGEL Farage. Because you tell you about Jeremy Corbyn. Don't forget, of course, Jeremy Corbyn was at Glastonbury getting all that chant there. So he did whip up, and it does feel exactly the same. This sort of hysteria that then doesn't necessarily translate into an election result. Reform really have just been bubbling around for a while. And then when Nigel Farage came in,
Boom.
First of all, it's all about him. Secondly, he said, look, I'm here for 2029. You guys look after yourselves for the next 5 years, and then I'm going to be Prime Minister in 2029. It all feels very much about it, and as you say, quite Trumpy.
But the whole Tory strategy was to squeeze reform down under 10%. And, Nigel Farage come back and they're bumping around somewhere between 13 and 18%. This is going to be devastating to the Tories.
Well, look, I talked about the fact that the early election, I think if it had been a later election, Nigel Farage would have been involved in Donald Trump's campaign, etc., etc. But so that was a situation. But it's clearly not going to be good for us because what he is, Nigel Farage is in touch with the zeitgeist. It's a disaffection. He's basically the right-wing version of the Lib Dems. Actually, they're not going to be in government, but they are.
But he's going to get votes.
But they're corralling disaffected people.
Let's have a look. I had a chat with Nigel on top of a bus, parked inside a building. It was quite weird, but have a watch.
You had a bit of a buzz there, didn't you?
Huge energy. I mean, the energy, and the optimism, and people really feel. And do you know what they're buying into? They're buying into the idea this is just the first step of something really big and really fundamental, and it is. I promise you.
You're really here for 5 years?
Oh yeah.
Where do you think you'll be this time? What, Friday morning?
I mean, clearly, the breakthrough is very, very important because that's the energy that will be needed to get it really motoring between now and the end of the year. It's going to be.
Will you be an MP?
I think so. I mean, who knows? Never take anything for life for granted, But I hope so. I hope so. If I'm not, others will be. I'm certain of that.
How many do you think you're going to get?
I really don't know. And do you know something? The polling is so hard to read because traditional polling methods, without a doubt, underplay where we really are. Now, a lot can happen in the next few days, and there have been so many banana skins put in our way in the last few days, but it doesn't seem to have really hurt us.
A few banana skins you've trodden on, though. Do you think the Ukraine stuff has had an impact?
Well, hang on a second. I mean, I said this 10 years ago.
Yeah, but I mean, the way you said it in that Nick Robinson interview, people got the point you were making, but it wasn't that you were being. Putin was the aggressor in this war, right?
Which I've said from the start.
You don't shy away from that.
No, I think his behaviour has been reprehensible. But understanding why something's gone badly wrong might just help you to work out what the solution is going ahead from here.
Have you felt any kickback on the doorstep from it?
Some people, because of the way it's been twisted, yes. But then, the warmongers from the Tory and Labour parties, I've been at odds with them for over 20 years. I was vehemently against Iraq, vehemently against Libya. I believe that war's a last resort, not a first resort.
Jack, banana skins, as he describes it there, the row about Ukraine, his comments sort of suggesting that the EU and NATO are to blame. He's admitting there that it's hurt him on the doorstep. How big an impact do you think it's actually had?
Yeah, I think that when there are disillusioned Tory voters who, when they go into the ballot box and they think of all sorts of things about Labour supermajorities and Tories being reduced to a rump, that could play in terms of where they waver their pen or pencil over the box.
Always vote with the pen.
Always vote with the pen. Well, exactly. Tinfoil hats on. But I think in the grand scheme of things, listen, Nigel Farage, to his base, is a political rock star in the same way that Trump is. And you saw that there with the pyrotechnics and the sort of rapturous applause. That is not how you win elections in Britain. Because Donald Trump, for example, is a Republican candidate who has now captured that entire party in a two-party system. Nigel Farage is starting from a very low point. And yes, he may have 14, 15, 16+% in the polls. That is not going to shake out to nearly as many seats as he would like. You might have a clutch of 2, 3, 4 seats on Friday, 5th of July. And so I think that he hasn't still answered the central charge that what he is doing is just sapping votes away from Rishi Sunak. And I think that's what's going to happen.
Martino, I asked him about this, and he said he didn't care. Basically, he so wants to punish the Conservative Party for what he sees as betrayal of Brexit that he's willing to essentially prop up Keir Starmer. Do you think he's a Trump-style sort of takeover coming? He says he's kicking around for 5 years. Do you think that's his plan?
Right. I thought in the interview you did yesterday, it was really interesting that he talked about a Labour supermajority, and he said that would actually be a better thing than a Labour's more majority because the hard left could come in, and I would see a Labour supermajority as a better thing. So it's really clear that his mission is to destroy the Conservative Party. Now, what is he going to do next after the Conservative Party is reduced to nothing? I think there could be the prospect of Nigel Farage becoming or leader or becoming a Tory MP.
Well, would like to see Nigel Farage in the Conservative Party?
No, I think no, not at all. Because we just talked about the ego. So you talked about him saying about we betrayed Brexit. Then he wants to destroy the Conservative Party, have a major, significant Labour government coming in, who are going to take us one way. with the relationship with EU, and it's not the way that Nigel Farage wants to be. You know, this is a guy, he talked about Ukraine. Actually, the more worrying was is what he said when he said he admired Putin, and he admired Putin because of the way he had approached his route to power, which is effectively pushing people out of hotel balconies and imprisoning his opposition. You know,
he did clarify those points yesterday. He did say, you know, I've always said he's reprehensible, but you can't, I think once you're explaining, you're losing. Right?
But exactly, because if you're talking about admiring someone like Vladimir Putin, I think end of sentence.
Rishi Sunak said at the beginning of this camp, I respect Nigel Farage. I have a lot of respect for Nigel Farage. Do you think the Tories have been too late in taking off the gloves and getting down in the gutter with him?
Maybe. I mean, you have to respect him, as I say, because he is talking what a lot of people want. Words about what a lot of people want to hear. As I say, he's tapped into that zeitgeist. He's tapped into that disaffection. He is talking to them. He doesn't have solutions for them, but he's channeling that anger.
I want to show you another clip from yesterday. There's a guy called Zahir Yusuf. He's an entrepreneur, an investor, and he took to the stage, and it was pretty powerful stuff. Have a look.
This is a movement for British people of all races and faiths who love their country. A movement for those who want to see British values protected, who wish to see our culture celebrated. But let us be under no illusions. This mission will not be easy. Quite the opposite. We will have to face down the entire political and media establishment who hate us for what we love.
Oh, that doesn't... Forgive me for... Well, I'm just going to say it. You wouldn't expect a prominent British Asian businessman to be on the stage at Reform and have them literally eating out the palm of his hand, would you? It doesn't really fit the narrative.
No, it doesn't.
Of the party of racists and cranks and weirdos that the so-called establishment are trying to paint it.
Because that's a curated rally. But then when it touches reality, you have people calling gay people nonsense. The other day when he saw one of his events managers saw a police car, he's got other people saying reprehensible racist thing. And all Nigel Farage can then do is boycott the BBC as a result of what he sees as a biased audience, which, any party, if you go on something like Question Time, if you had a balanced audience, any party is going to be in the minority because most people don't vote for a single party. So if he's at, say, 20% at best, when you add in the don't knows, there's probably 9 out of 10 people in that audience, of a representative audience, that were against Nigel Farage. So clearly it's going to...
Let's see what Nigel Farage had to say about his donor desire.
Well, I think what will happen, actually, is somebody younger, brighter and better looking than me will come along.
Could we have seen them on the stage today? Mr. impressive guy, right?
I think this boy's got real talent.
Reform big enough for 2 big characters like that?
Oh, goodness me. Do you know, when I see the right person succeed me, I will know. I first met Zia 10 years ago.
Yeah.
We've been in touch over the years. He represents absolutely the best of British values. I think he's going to be an enormous force.
We see him as a candidate one day, you think?
Oh, Lord, yes.
Jack, have we just seen Nigel Farage's successor?
Well, I think it's probably not going to be Richard Tice round 2, is it?
Oh,
I think that...
why? You love Richard Tice.
Yeah, well, listen, I think that it was obviously a very stirring speech yesterday. He's obviously a fantastic orator. He's got a good background. Like you said, you can't get away from
£300 million quid in the bank from selling his company helps as well.
Yeah, exactly. You can't get away from the fact, again, he is a British Asian Muslim. Automatically dispels any idea that he's some sort of racist. Obviously, Reform have had problems in the past.
Yeah.
I think he would help get rid of that notion. But listen, I think every party has their wrong-uns, and I think that Nigel Farage is right when he points that out. Tories, Labour, Green Party especially, they all have people, especially when it comes to a snap election. And it's difficult, isn't it, to try and be able to take ownership of that.
Martina, are Reform being held to a higher standard than, say, the Greens, who are full of anti-Semitic cranks as well?
Well, I think during the local elections, for example, there was quite a lot of focus on candidates. But I think I would agree with that to an extent, because we've seen lots of Conservative candidates that have not exactly been good either. And I remember Mark Spencer, when he was Commons leader a couple of years ago, he said, do not worry about it, because when the election comes, we weren't prepared in 2019, but when the next general election comes, we'll be prepared. We're going to have the best candidates out there. And it didn't quite turn out to be the case.
Paul... Was the surprise election sprung on one party, the party that actually called it, when everyone else seemed to be in a much better position to be doing it? I know you've been an advocate for going later, right?
Later of November, yeah. Well, we surprised the umbrella holder, so I mean, clearly, if you're doing that, you're probably getting something wrong. But and what I was hearing over the weekend was because of the way the betting was spiking, that there was a sense that actually Labour had seen that. And they bought all the advertising.
So they literally shot themselves in the foot.
So that could well be. And well, I've quoted the fact that I'm not a millipede, so I've shot in both feet at the moment. I haven't got enough feet left. But so you know, I just come back to the fact we've got 4 days left, and we've just got to get to 3 days left, and we've just got to get on with the job of actually making sure we get local champions that can provide that strong opposition. I think for me, I fear the election is lost. But those local champions can really provide.
And what comes next? What
direction
would you like to see the Conservative Party
we
go?
need sensible heads to reconstruct the party. And it's not a matter of swinging to one side or another. Because if you look at some of the polls, you look at the way the votes have gone, around 50% go towards reform and 50% go to Labour and Lib Dems. So if you swing one way ideologically without getting the competence and the unity right, then actually you just end up dripping to the other side.
Could anyone have held that 2019 coalition together? Obviously, Boris Johnson built that coalition in 2019. It was built around, Brexit and Corbyn. Once Johnson was gone, was anyone else to do it, or was it doomed from the start?
I suspect we'd have just lost in a different way. But I think, Boris Johnson could have held it, but mainly at a time if he'd tackled Partygate very, very early. And as you do, anybody that knows about communication, you just grip it. Exactly that.
9 years in office, he's been a friend of the paper, friend of the Sun, High Street champion at one point. I think you helped out on the fuel duty campaign, lots of things. Biggest regret for leaving? What's your fondest memory? Go on, give us a 30-second Paul eulogy.
Fondest memory is as Post Office Minister setting up the inquiry for the Horizon Postmasters and starting the compensation scheme. That's the best thing I'm ever going to do in politics. As Hospitality Minister, supporting our pubs and restaurants, and actually
through some really, really tough times.
I was really proud to
Couldn't get you off the phone at one point.
Well, there you go. I actually won 2 hospitality industry awards over that time, despite having closed them. So sort of, that is a great source of pride. And it's always the 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen, use them in that proportion. Listen more than you do speak.
Don't go anywhere. Next, Theresa May. Problem with elections is you always get a load of weirdos knocking on your door when you're trying to watch the football, and you have to hide behind the sofa. Otherwise, this happens.
My name is Theresa May, and I'm here supporting Luke Graham, the Conservative candidate for the general election on the 4th of July. As you're not in, I'll pop a leaflet through your door.
Oh, the Ringo election. Is that what we're going to call it? The doorbell, the doorbell people. I mean, that's quite sweet in a way, isn't it?
It's lovely. I actually had Theresa May come and help me when she was Home Secretary
in
2015.
Did that help, though?
Actually, no, it did. It did. In 2015, when she was Home Secretary, you would not have known that she wasn't just an ordinary person doing anything apart from this black car going very slowly with her notification officers. But she is very down to earth, as you see.
She is the sort of person that has literally does the shoe leather of the Tory party, right, Jack?
Oh, completely. She's always out there pounding pavements. And I think that whatever you have to say about Theresa May, and a lot of people think she was a disastrous Prime Minister, there was always this sense that she was actually in it for public service. She loved the Conservative Party. And, she doesn't have to do anything in this election. She's standing down. So trekking all the way up to Scotland to go and help a local candidate, I think really speaks to the measure of the woman.
Martin, it's fascinating how the 3 other Prime Ministers, other than Rishi Sunak in this Parliament, have adopted, 2 other Prime Ministers have adopted the strategy. Obviously, Liz Truss is
campaigning hard.
Campaigning extremely hard to hold her seat against some resurgent Lib Dems and local independents. And then Boris Johnson has obviously taken the air war approach of videos and using his column in a rival paper to make the point. Do you think what's the most effective one? Do you think?
The most effective one.
Well, Theresa May, pavement.
According to the polls, I'm not sure they're being quite effective, but definitely Theresa May, I thought that was a good stunt. And I'm very fascinated about the way canvassing has changed because of the doorbell cameras.
There's no
escaping, and people have got to think, what am I going to say now that I'm on camera, and I could end up on social media. So
exactly.
Speaking of ex-Prime Ministers, John Major as well. Remember him?
Oh, John
coming
Major.
Out of the woodwork?
Who does he endorse? He endorsed Caroline Noakes.
Caroline Noakes. I think it was the only presence he's had in this entire campaign. John Major obviously came out in 1997 as Prime Minister. Finally now coming out, and there we go. He's endorsing Caroline Noakes.
John Major helped you in a marginal seat?
Well, to be fair, he was born in St Helena Hospital.
Well, there we go.
There you go, maybe.
There we go. I did hear on a podcast the other day that Michael Heseltine was complaining that he hasn't been asked to come and help the Tories. I don't know. I wonder why. Paul Scully, lovely to see you. Don't be a stranger. Martina, Jack, let's go upstairs and do some work. We'll be back tomorrow. In fact, I won't be back tomorrow. Kate Ferguson will be here in the never mind the ballot election countdown hot seat. Remember, subscribe to us, youtube.com/SunElection. We've got some very exciting plans for election night. You don't want to miss it.